Good morning. So on behalf of the Department of Environmental Protection, I want to welcome you to the 2018 Falcon Banding event here at the Rachel Carson State Office Building. So today's a big day that we're looking forward to banding the young falcons, the eyises, and the biologists will also be going over their current health and what their physical status is. And then we're going to do a little question and answer here and some other activities before the event concludes. So before I go any further, I would like to welcome to the podium the Secretary of Department of Environmental Protection, Mr. Patrick McDonald.
Good morning. Thank you, Bert. And thank you all for being here today. Very exciting day here at the Department of Environmental Protection with the 2018 Peregrine Falcon Banding event. I want to thank all the viewers, listeners who are watching this through our live stream. And while you're watching, you can direct questions by use of social media on Twitter by following @Falcon Chatter, that's all one word, and using the hashtag HBG Falcons Banding, or on Facebook by writing in the comments of the Facebook Live video. These falcons are incredibly important to the department and the mission that we have as a Commonwealth. This is the 18th consecutive year that we've had the Peregrine Falcons residing here on the 15th floor of the Rachel Carson State Office Building. The building is located right across the street from a train station, so if you're listening online and you occasionally hear a train going by, that is why. We're right across from an Amtrak station. But I think it's no accident, it's symbolic that the Falcons reside here on the Rachel Carson State Office Building. Rachel Carson was incredibly important in terms of addressing the chemicals that led to the decline of the peregrine falcon species in particular. So having them here on the building is a real testament to what Rachel Carson, a great Pennsylvanian, a great environmentalist, accomplished. The infamous pesticide DDT was banned, and the banning of that DDT allowed the threatened birds of prey, such as the bald eagle, many hawks, and the falcon, to make their comeback. Our current pair has been here since 2012, when the current female arrived. The male has been here since 2005. To put that in some perspective, I've been here since 1998. So I'm here almost as long as we've had falcons on the building. If anything can spark competition, it's love in real estate. We had a fight over both of those here earlier this season, as we had two newcomers appear on the ledge in the early weeks of the courtship, an 8-year-old male who was banded in Clinton County, and an almost 2-year-old female that was banded in Logan Township, New Jersey. Well, in the end, the resident pair that we've had here stayed here, and the other two went off to find greener pastures. During the weeks of courtship, if you haven't seen it online, what you'd notice is the male swooping, offering food, putting on some incredible displays right outside the windows of our building here in Harrisburg. There are lots of bows to his mate, and the pair engaged in great vocal interaction. Displays clearly worked, as we had 4 eggs hatch this year. Since 2000, 64 of the 77 eggs have hatched, 36 have been females, 26 have been males, and the sex of 2 hatchlings in 2008 and last year in 2017 were undetermined. All were banded by biologists with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Several Rachel Carson's young falcons have reportedly been nesting in Ohio, Maryland, Delaware, and other locations in Pennsylvania. This specific nest site is the most productive in the Commonwealth. We've been streaming the Harrisburg Falcons for 18 years now, and in the last 2 years we've released some new and exciting features. Falcon Cam followers can now watch the Harrisburg Falcons in high definition, have access to more camera angle options, and even view the falcon's behavior after dark with infrared nighttime viewing. The infrared feature is really cool if you haven't had a chance to see it, and allows followers to watch the falcons any hour of the day. This year we also installed 3 new microphones, further improving the experience so you can hear the vocalizations, and you'll hear it today for sure. The Falcons definitely have a reaction during the banding event as we bring the younger ones into the room here. The parents worry for their young, and we'll hear that and try to get this done as quickly as possible to minimize that stress. As a member, the Falcons are birds of prey, and as a member of the Falcon family, they're built for speed. When attacking their prey, they can actually go into a dive that goes over 200 miles per hour. Incredible to watch as we're here in Harrisburg. When the prey falls to the ground, the falcon picks it up, carries it to a convenient perch to be eaten. In our case, we often see them eating their meals on the 15th floor here of the building. Throughout the season, we ask viewers to help identify the prey, what types of birds are being seen on the ledge through a citizen science feature on the website. This feature has allowed us to identify many different species, such as pigeons, Baltimore orioles, blue jays, woodpeckers, and other small birds. So I want to thank everybody out there for their help in identifying those species, and thank you for your continued dedication to keeping watch on these endangered falcons. I'd also like to thank the PA Game Commission for their partnership and support in making their event happen. So now what I'd like to do is welcome Matthew Schnook, Director of Wildlife Management with the Game Commission, up for the next phase of our program here today. Matthew?
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Good morning.
Hi. Good morning.
Glad to see everybody here today. What a wonderful morning. You know, this is really an interesting process that we're seeing here today. And it really shows the confluence of 2 different things, right? We've got this urban area and this area that has all these offices, buildings, so on and so forth. You wouldn't think wildlife, right? But that's exactly what we're here for, is wildlife. So what a really neat treat for you guys to see, especially these young guys. I love to see these young guys out here, really expecting to see something cool, and what a cool thing to see. So I think that this is just the initial part of this process is to see these birds, but you guys should take this home. Tell your parents about it, get outside, enjoy the outdoors more, right? Put the cell phones down, get outside, get off the screens, and enjoy this kind of stuff, right? It's really cool. And so that's all I want to say. I just want to tell you young kids, get out and start to enjoy this stuff. There's a lot of it out there. I want to introduce Art, who's the knowledgeable guy here. He's got a lot of experience with this stuff, and he's really going to show you some really neat stuff that we're doing here. And so if you have any questions or comments or anything along those lines, please ask. And again, glad to see you all here. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Bert. Thank you, Secretary McDonald. Thank you for that introduction and for all of that good background. And I want to thank all of you from Pine Grove and from Bright Horizons for coming out here today. My name is Art McMorris. As Matthew just told you, I'm the Peregrine Falcon Coordinator for the Pennsylvania Game Commission. And this nest here is a cooperation. It's a partnership that's been going on for 18 years now between the Pennsylvania Game Commission, the Department of Environmental Protection, and also the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. We all work together to conserve peregrine falcons across the state. And I have a couple helpers who, Dan, could you come up, and Renee and Sue. This is quite a process. As Secretary McDonald told you, DDT was responsible for devastating effects on wildlife. It was used to kill insect pests, particularly agricultural pests, and at the time that it was used very heavily right after World War II. At the time that it was thought to be completely harmless to birds and mammals. It's death to insects, but it was thought to be harmless for warm-blooded animals. Now we know better. It was responsible for devastating effects on bald eagles, ospreys, brown pelicans, even some cetaceans such as beluga whales. All of their numbers were reduced. Peregrine falcons were reduced to 0. By 1964, there were no peregrine falcons successfully breeding in North America east of the Rockies and south of the Arctic. So that's a pretty devastating effect. But a number of agencies, the Pennsylvania Game Commission and other agencies, raised peregrine falcons in captivity, turned them loose, and so the population has been reestablished and it's recovering. What we're here for today is what we call a nest visit. Sometimes we call it a banding visit, but banding is just one of the 4 things that we do when we come to the nest. One is to find out what happened. Here there's a camera on the nest, thanks to DEP, and people worldwide can see what's going on. But at most of our nests, we can't see into the nest. We don't know for sure until we go there and say, whoa, look at that, there are 3 nestlings. We wouldn't have known that. So that's number 1. Number 2 is once we find nestlings, we give them health checkups. We give them medication if that's needed. The third thing is to identify the parents by the bands that they're wearing, and then the 4th thing is to band the youngsters. Banding is our most important tool for monitoring the population as it recovers. By identifying the birds with a band on their leg, we can tell later on when they're seen, we can tell how long they live, where they go, whether they start breeding, if they're breeding successfully, lots of other things that are very important for us in managing the recovery of the population. So we have the 4 there were 4 nestlings. What we did is we banded one right away and put it back on the nest ledge so that it can go back to the parents, and the parents say, oh, we're calm now. We've got our baby back. As my boss told me years ago, peregrines can't count. Once they've got 1 young, then they settle down. And of course, that one settles down. And we'll get these back on the ledge as soon as we can. So here is, we'll call this one bird number 2. Okay, and I know that one of you is taking notes. Yes, I see you over there. Thank you very much. You hear that? I'm not hurting this bird, but that's its alarm call. It doesn't know what's happening, so it's calling to let its parents know something's going on. I don't know what it is, but I want to let you know, and to let its nestmates know, hey, watch out, something's going on. But I'm not hurting you, am I? Where is our scale? Do we have a scale set up? We don't have a scale. Okay, so we'll go to plan B, which is why I brought this backpack. Okay, Dan, if you could have that, hold that for me. This is Dan Mummert from the Pennsylvania Game Commission, Renee Larry, who is a volunteer, and Sue Hannon, who is a volunteer, and they're all helping me with this process. So we're going to weigh this. In peregrine falcons, also in hawks and owls, the females are larger than the males. The ornithologists who are mammals call that reverse sexual dimorphism. Now, if there are birds that specialize in studying mammals, they would call mammals reverse sexual dimorphism. Because in mammals, the males are bigger. That's backwards, isn't it? So anyway, the females are larger than the males, and because of that, we need to know the sex when we band them because the females get a bigger band. So I know how old these are because they hatched on camera. They are 22, 23, and 24 days old. And I didn't really, just by looking at it, I could tell that this was a male. But the scale tells the tale. This one is 580 grams, 580. So that's the age, that's the weight that a male should be at this age. And by the way, that's the same weight as his father. How many of you grew up to be just as big as your parents when you were less than 4 weeks old? Would you all raise your hands, please? This is truly amazing. So that tells us that this is a male. I've handled a lot of these, so I could tell by looking at them, but there's no substitute for hard data. So now we have the hard data, and we know that it's a male. And there's another thing that I'm going to do as well, and that is I'm going to measure his leg, because we use size 6 bands for the males, size 7A bands for the females. Before I do that, though, I'm going to give him a quick exam. I'm looking at his eyes. His eyes are good. They're nice and shiny. If he were dehydrated, they'd be a little bit foggy. and I'm looking for any deformities, and there aren't any. Since he's yelling at me, I can look down his throat. Yeah, let me have a look at you, buddy. Not like that. There we go. And his mouth is nice and clean. I'm looking for evidence of trichomoniasis. That's a protozoal infection that if they get it at this age, it's fatal. I have antibiotics with me that I can treat birds that with early stages of trichomoniasis. And we'll return to that subject in a few minutes. I'm checking his ears. His ears are good. They don't have an external ear like we do, that you could put an earring on. They have an ear canal, and I can feel that there are no parasites inside the ears. I'm feeling for the development of his flight muscles. The keel is good. Okay, that's what we call it, keel. The keel is a breastbone, and it's not standing out. So his flight muscles are developing well, and I can tell that by his weight, too, because he's the weight that he should be at this age. Now I'm going to hand the bird to Dan. And now we're going to get personal here, buddy. I'm going to check your vent. I'm looking for evidence of parasites there. His vent is clean. Well, it's kind of dirty, but there are no parasites in there. I'm checking his feet and his legs. Those are fine. There are no deformities. I'm going to take a leg gauge here. See, it has notches of different sizes. So I'm going to measure his leg. And it fits nicely in the size 6 slot. That also tells me that he's a male, and we're going to use size 6 bands on him. Then I'm going to check him for what we call ectoparasites, parasites on the outside. And that is blood-sucking flies and lice, some of which suck blood, others eat feathers, which is not good if you're a bird. They use their feathers not only to fly, but also to keep warm and to keep dry. And also there are mites. There are feather mites that actually eat feathers. And I do see some bugs. What I see are blood-sucking flies, so we'll treat him for that. Okay, before we go on to the bands, is there anything that I have forgotten? Oh, we'll take a look at his crop. Oh, yes. If you can look right there, you see that tumor right there? That's not a tumor, that's his crop. It's sort of a sac in his esophagus, and they store food in there when they eat it. These guys are growing, I told you how fast they grow. They'll have about 6 meals a day. This guy has already had 2 meals, and his crop is full. And when that's empty, he'll eat some more. So now we're ready to band him. So we'll take a size 6 band, and this goes on the right leg. Okay, can you read that band? No, you're not Superman. I can't read it from here either. This is a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service band. It has a 9-digit number on it. That same numbering system is used for birds throughout the United States and Canada. So this is an identification. But the thing is, you can't read this band unless you have the bird in your hands, which we have now. And later on, if it's found injured or dead, you can read the band. But if it's free flying, you can't. And we'll return to that in a moment as well. So I'm going to put this band on his right leg, because that's where it goes. And the band number, if you could, the band number for you is, you ready for this? 1126-08075. Okay? 1126-08075. That's going on his right leg. And I'll squeeze it with the pliers. Now I'm squeezing the band. I'm not squeezing the leg. We squeeze it to close it. You know, people sometimes ask, does that hurt the bird? Well, I've got a watch and I've got a wedding ring and they're not hurting me. And this doesn't hurt him either. So we use the pliers to fasten the band. Yes, buddy, I'm not hurting you. But boy, your brother and sister sure can hear you. And they'll be saying the same thing in a minute. But your big sister, who's back on the nestlings now, she was screaming like that too, but she has settled down. Because she's home with mom and dad now. Okay, so we squeeze it closed. These are lock-on bands with a tab so that that bird can't play with it and take it off. Maybe when you were little, you had like a bracelet and you'd play with it. Okay? These are like little kids. They would play with it as well, and they are so strong that if it didn't have this lock-on tab, they could pry it right off. So that's the band that you cannot read. So on his left leg, I'm going to put this second band. Those of you in the front row, can you read that? Okay. This is band number 86 over BP. 86 over Bravo Papa. And it's black over green. This band, if you get a good look at the free living bird with binoculars or a telescope, or you get a good photograph of it, you can read that. And that's how we know who the parents are here. As Secretary McDonald told you, they're both from Pennsylvania. They are both from Bridges on the Delaware River. Mom came from the Pennsylvania Turnpike Bridge across the Delaware River. She hatched in 2009, so she's 8 years old this year. Dad hatched from the Walt Whitman Bridge that goes across the Delaware River in Philadelphia. He hatched in 2003, so he's 15. He's an elderly gentleman now. Peregrines don't usually live to that ripe old age in the wild. It's a rough life out there. Now there's one more thing that I'm going to do to help identify these birds. When they fledge, these birds at buildings or at nests on bridges, which the birds see, and they say, oh, that looks like a cliff for me. People built a cliff. Before people started modifying the landscape, peregrines nested on cliff ledges, and now they look at the Rachel Carson building and say, oh, look at this nice artificial cliff that somebody built for me. Trouble is, when they fledge, which means that they are taking their first flight, they're not very good at it. You remember when you were learning how to ride a bicycle? You'd fall a lot. You were unsteady. You weren't very strong. These birds are the same. When they take their first flight, they will end up on the sidewalk or in the street where they might get run over, or they fly into windows, into glass, and get injured. They think they can fly right through there, but they can't. Or they land on power lines and get fried. Those that are on a bridge nest, they will end up in the river, and they're not ducks. So here at Rachel Carson and at every place where we can manage it, we have a crew of volunteer fledge watchers. And when a bird ends up in the street, Sue is smiling and Renee is smiling because they've done this many times. They run out in the street, stop traffic, pick up the bird, and put it someplace safe. And some years, every single bird that fledges from this nest gets rescued at least once. And if they weren't rescued, they'd die, and they wouldn't contribute to the growth of the population. That doesn't happen at cliffs, but it does at these man-made sites. So when they fledge, with this piece of white tape, that's even easier to see than the 86 over BP. So the volunteers can say, oh, white has fledged. Red hasn't fledged yet, but she looks like she's about ready, and so forth. Okay. I'm sorry? I did not, because these are old enough now that that's not reliable. Yeah. What Sue is pointing out is we can age the birds, we can tell their age within a half a day between day 13 and day 21 by measuring how far their tail feathers have grown. After day 21, it's not reliable anymore. And these are days 22, 23, and 24, so I won't even bother. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to do, and Renee, do you have the Okay. Now, I looked in this bird's throat for evidence of trichomoniasis. I did not see any. But it's possible that there's a very, very early infection that I can't even see yet. So I'm going to take a swab from its throat, and we send this off to collaborators at the University of Tennessee in the veterinary medical school there. And they will culture this. And the number, again, is 86/BP. And they can detect the infections at the very earliest stages. And if they detect an early stage infection, I can come back and give them antibiotics. It's not good, well, it's not really bad, but we don't like to give antibiotics if they don't need it. So we'll do this test, and if they need antibiotics, they'll get it, and if they don't, they won't. Okay, little guy. Renee, can I hand you that? Thank you. Yeah, that's it, open wide. Yeah, that's it, bite my thumb. Bite my thumb. There we go. Okay, tickle, tickle, tickle. Tickle, tickle, tickle. Yeah, what does that feel like? You haven't had that feeling before. Thank you, mister. Okay, so that goes into the pouch. And now Renee's going to mess with that so that we can close it up. And the last thing that I'm going to do now is powder these, because we did find some blood-sucking flies. I'm putting powder on this bird. This is flea and tick powder that I got from a pet store. It's really made for dogs and cats, but it's also very effective for birds. It's a good insecticide. It kills insects and it kills mites, which are not insects. You probably know they're arachnids related to spiders. But it really is harmless to birds and to mammals. I could eat this. I prefer not to, but I could eat this and I would be perfectly okay. This is actually isolated from chrysanthemums. And that's what chrysanthemums use it for. Are we done? Have I done everything? Have I forgotten anything? Thank you. Plants can't run away from predators, so they use chemical warfare. So chrysanthemums make the pyrethrins to keep the bugs away. Many plants do things like that. Nicotine is an insecticide. So that's why tobacco makes nicotine, to protect itself from bugs. And it's murder on the bugs, and it's not so good for people either. So we don't dust these with nicotine. Okay? But that is from chrysanthemums. Okay, we'll move on to bird number 3 now. How we doing, big girl? Oh, you're a big girl. Remember what the male looked like? Look at her. Look at the size of those feet. Remember what the male's feet look like? She's a big girl. In you go. There you go. Yeah, I hear you. So do your brothers, but mom and dad don't because they're upstairs. Maybe giving your sister her 3rd meal of the day. Okay. Did I say big girl? Yeah, she's big. She's 810 grams, 810. Sometimes these birds get up to a whole kilogram, which you know is 2.2 pounds. And they actually lose a little bit of that weight when they mature further and they work off some of that baby fat. Hey, big girl, how you doing? Yeah, it's me, the big monster. Okay. Usually the first thing I look for is look in the mouth, because that's really Okay, the mouth looks good. Mouth looks good. No evidence of any infection. The eyes look good. The ears are good. What happens with the ears is flies can sometimes lay their eggs in the ears. And then the maggots, well, they eat dead cells, so they don't really hurt the ears. But sometimes they get so many in there that the ear opening just bulges, and that's got to be uncomfortable. So if we find any parasites in there, we take them out. His ears are good. And the reason I'm checking the vent is the same reason. The vent looks good. If you were a fly, would you want to lay your eggs in the rear end of a bird? Sounds kind of gross, but that's what they do. But her vent is good. Okay, I'm going to throw the leg gauge on her leg. I don't really need to because I can see it, but it fits comfortably in the size 7A. I can squeeze it into the size 6, but that's a squeeze. We don't want the bands to squeeze. So she's size 7A. That also tells us she's a female. Let's look for bugs. If one has bugs, they all have bugs because they share. Yep, she's got bugs. I don't have to look further. Okay, anything else that I've forgotten before we go to bands? Oh, the keel. Thank you. Keel is good. Her flight muscles are developing well, but I already knew that by her weight. Okay, this isn't something that I normally... Okay, her crop is empty. Look at that, no bulge. No bulge. That's really not an important part of the exam, but it's worth noting when it's there. Anything else before we go to bands? Okay, so let's go to the Fish and Wildlife band, the one that you can't read unless you got the bird in your hands. And this one here is number 1947, okay, 31037. You got that? 1947, 31037. And although you can't read the number from there, you can see that it's a bigger band. So that's going on her right leg. Yes, I hear you. Can you hear me? We squeeze the band, not the leg. We fold that tab closed so she can't mess with it and take it off. I check to make sure that it's nice and round, nice and smooth. Oh, that's not quite round, so I'm going to take the pliers and kind of mess with it a little bit so that it fits comfortably. I hear you. You know, I heard you the first time. Okay, that's good. I think she loves me. She doesn't want to let go. And the last one was white. Is that correct? So I'll put on blue tape. This is Miss Blue. And my blue tape roll is kind of messed up. We're patriotic. The 3 birds so far have been red, white, and blue. Now I'm putting just a skinny strip of tape on here. I want to put on enough so that you can see this from a distance, but I don't want to cover up the numbers on the band, because if somebody finds this bird, let's say they find a dead bird, if I had covered up the numbers, and they don't know about bird bands, and they just say, oh, it's got a solid blue band on it. But I'm not covering up the numbers so that anybody who finds this bird will see that there's a number on there. There's also a toll-free phone number to call up the bird banding laboratory in Maryland and report the number. And there's also a web address so that they can go onto the web and report that they found this particular bird. Okay, now her left leg is going to get the band that you can read from a distance, and that is number 25 over BS. 25 over Bravo Sierra. The first band attached with a tab that I fold over with pliers. These color bands, oh, and that's black over green. These color bands attach with rivets. Just a different way of making the band so that it's secure. I hear ya. I really do. Now we'll swab her throat. Thank you. Voila. One year, 10% of the nestlings were infected with trick. 10% of the total production. So I was able to go back to the nest, treat them with antibiotics, and they all lived. They all fledged successfully, and some of them have been seen since then in other states. Oh, you got a nice bite, didn't you? And without being treated, they probably all would have died. Almost certainly all would have died. Thank you, miss. The trichomonas affects many different birds. And since peregrine falcons eat birds, if they catch a pigeon that has a trichomonas infection and they eat the pigeon, then they'll get infected. And since all the nestlings share food, if you watch them on the camera, on the nest camera, you'll see them fighting over food, taking it out of each other's mouths. So once one gets infected, they're all infected. So the main source would be, there you go. I didn't mark the pouch. Thank you. The number is 25 over BS. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to give you some powder to get those nasty bugs off of you. Okay. This stuff is really effective. One year I was banding some birds on a bridge. It's actually the bridge that Mom came from. I wasn't banding Mom that day. It wasn't her year. But at any rate, there were 5 nestlings, and they were just crawling with bugs. So I powdered them, and I also swabbed them for trick, sent it off to Tennessee. I think we're done here. And the results came back that one of them was infected with trick. Well, as I just told you, once one is infected, they're all going to get the infection. So I went back a couple days later to treat them with antibiotics, which was successful. And while I was treating them, I looked for bugs. Not a bug on any one of them. The powder had really done its job. Okay. And another, are you a big boy? You look like a boy, but you're kind of big. So we'll see. Okay, here's bird number 4. That's his name, bird number 4. People often ask, well, what's the bird's name? Now, local aficionados often give names to the birds. At the Game Commission, we don't, if you want to name them, go right ahead. We don't name them because we don't see them as pets. We see them as wild animals, which is what they are. Okay? So this is bird number 4, and once he gets a band, he'll go by the band number. And this one here is 635 grams, 635. Now we're aware that we're weighing not only the bird, but we're weighing his breakfast. And if he hasn't been to the bathroom recently, we're weighing that as well. Nevertheless, the weights are give us an accurate indication of the sex of the bird. Hey, big guy. Here you go. Let's have a look at you. Now, when I'm handling these, I have to hold them securely, but I'm not squeezing. We don't want to squeeze it. It's not good for them. So it's a balancing act. Yes, your mouth is nice and clean. That's what we like to see. The mouth is clean. The eyes are good. Thank you for looking right at me and opening your mouth so that I could do those exams. The ears are good. The keel is good. I can feel, yeah, he's got a bit of food in his crop. It's not sticking out like the first bird that we looked at, though. Okay. Here we go, Dan. He's yours. His talons are very sharp, very strong, but they're also very easy to injure. If I bend one of these wrongs, I could easily injure it. So we have to be gentle. How many of you have seen Jurassic Park? Not very many of you. Yeah, everybody's seen it. You remember the velociraptor with those fearsome claws? Birds evolved from dinosaurs. So when you look at these claws, you're looking at velociraptor claws. Those are how it catches its food, and that's his defense also. Sometimes people ask me, do they bite you? Well, they don't peck me, they foot me. Okay, what else am I doing? I've checked the keel is good. Hey, mister, I know you've got a vent under there somewhere. Yeah, I hear you, but I'm not hurting you. There we go. His vent is clean. I know he's got bugs, but I'm going to look anyway. Oh, look at that, you got bugs. Well, we'll take care of that for you. Anything I've forgotten before we go to bands? I will put the leg gauge on him, even though I don't really need to, because I can see your size 6. Your leg fits very comfortably inside the size 6. So you're going to get a size 6 band on your right leg. And he is getting band number 1126-08076. And that should be the next number after the last male. Good, thank you. And that's going on his right leg, because that's where it goes. Oh, thank you. Show a little leg. Are we right side up or right side up? putting the band on an upside down bird, we have to make sure we're doing it right side up. I hear you, buddy, but I'm not hurting you. I know that, and you know that too, because you don't hurt, do you? But you're just afraid of this big bad beast. And actually, we like them to be afraid of people, because they're not pets, they're wild animals, and it's better for them in the wild to just avoid people. Stay out of trouble. Now, his left leg is getting number 87 over BP, 87 over Bravo Papa, and that's black over green, as all of these are. The mother bird is also black over green, but the father is black over red. We used to use black over red, and we used up all the black over reds. So now we're using black over green, and the whole eastern United States uses these same color combinations. So if you see a black over green band on a bird, you know it's from the eastern United States. But to tell anything more than that, you have to get the number and track it down. So this is 87 over BP. That's what I will call him in the future, although some people here might call him Snookums or something like that. Who knows? And we'll give him yellow tape. So we have now red, white, blue, and yellow. There we go, Mr. Yellow. Now, I misled you. I said from now on I'm going to call him 87 over DP. I'm going to call him Yellow from now on. That's what everybody here will call him too, Mr. Yellow. Okay, you did. Thank you, Renee. Oh boy, you should come with me every time. Okay, and if you could hold that for me, please. Thank you. Okay, big guy, let's have a look. Say ah, or say screech, screech, screech. There you go. Hey, you can screech while you're having your throat swabbed. Boy, you're talented. Thank you, sir. There you go. Have we done everything before powder? Okay, here comes powder. Okay, wing number 2. We'll make sure to get plenty of powder on Dan as well. And on me. Thank you. Yeah. There we go. That's it. You hang on to my finger. If this were an adult, ow, I wouldn't have my fingers in its mouth. And we're done. Okay. So we're done with that. Dan is going to take the birds upstairs, maybe with some help as well. Yeah, I'll just, why don't the three of you, if you could. Yeah, I'll save it for next time. And that's the trash bag so that we don't litter the place. So we're done with that, and I would happy to entertain questions for the few minutes that we have left while Dan and Renee and Sue take the birds back up to the ledge so they can be with their sister who's been there all along. So any questions? Yes?
Yes. How much will these birds weigh when they're adults, the male and the female?
They're their full adult weight right now. So the female is anywhere from about 800 grams to a kilogram as an adult. And the males will be between, they average between 600, 650 grams, something like that. So that's 1.5 pounds for the males, 2 pounds for the females. They don't look as big as their parents because they don't have their long flight feathers. But the stuff that weighs, you know, that's all there, including some baby fat. Yes?
I have a question. What happens if they're over, like, can they be overweight?
It's a rough life out there. They have to work hard to catch food. They have to work hard to avoid predators. They have to work hard to stay healthy in storms and so forth. There's really, they're fit, you know. Some of you might go to the gym once or twice a week to work out for half an hour. These are working out day and night, every day of the week. It's not an easy life. People ask me, how long do they live? And there are two answers for that. In captivity, 20 years easily. In the wild, 10 to 12 years is a ripe old age because it's a rough life out there. So the father here, who's 15, he is, as I commented, he's an elderly gentleman. Not very many of them live to be that long. Yes?
How old does a chick need to be to spit out a pellet?
To
spit out a pellet.
Oh, they can do that from the time that they're really little. Yeah, they're not like, they do spit out pellets. Owls, you know, eat their food whole. They'll swallow a whole mouse. And they can't digest the bones and the feathers, so then they spit out the pellet. Peregrines don't swallow their food whole. They tear it up, they eat the meat, but they get bits of feathers and bits of bone by mistake. And so they will spit those pellets out as well. And if you see one doing this, you think, oh, that's a sick bird. It's going like that, and then it spits out the pellet. But they can do that from the time that they're very little. Yes?
Sorry, does the band have any effect on their flight, or is it virtually weightless when it's on their leg?
It weighs very little. It has no effect at all on their flight, on their behavior, no effect on anything.
So
If it were bad for them, we wouldn't do it. Everything we're doing here is to help the birds, to help the population recover. And that's the bottom line. If it doesn't help them, we don't do it. And when the population is fully recovered, and we're confident that the population is safe and secure and stable, we'll stop doing this and let nature run by its own rules. We're just doing this to restore the population that we're responsible for wiping out in the first place.
Dr. McMorris,
Yes.
we also solicited some questions from online and from other sources, so I was going to turn it over to Secretary McDonald, and he was going to ask you these questions that we received from our online friends.
Certainly.
Okay?
Sure. And
do I answer people by their Twitter names?
I don't have the Twitter names in front of
Okay,
me,
that's
so
fine.
I won't be able to get you that one. But kind of on that last question, got a question about how's the current population doing? So, you know, talked about 0 pairs being out there at one point. You know, where are we today? Where do we need to get to?
We're getting close. We're getting very close. I can't tell you the numbers for this year because the season isn't over yet, But last year we had 50 pairs of Peregrine falcons in Pennsylvania, which we're thrilled with. We also had 9 cliff nesting pairs. I told you about all the trouble they can get into if they're nesting on buildings or bridges or power plant smokestacks. So the cliffs are very important for the recovery because they don't land in the street, they don't land in the river, etc. So last year we had 9 cliff nesting pairs. This year I'm thrilled to tell you we have 12. So we're getting close to where we need to be to consider the population stable and secure.
That is great. We saw you apply the powder, and last year lice powder was also applied. Got a question, how long does that medicine last?
Well, it certainly doesn't last forever, but it gives the bird some relief for the week or two that it does last.
Okay. Why is it important to band the falcons when they're young?
When they're young, we walk up to them in the nest and we pick them up. When they're older, they're in your face. You can catch them when they're older. It's much harder to catch them when they're older. You need a lure, which would be a pigeon in a harness, and the pigeon flies, and then you have a bow net that you throw over it. It's much harder to catch them when they're adults. So we get them when they're young, when we can pick them up. And it's very important to get the age right also. When they're 20 days old, they're big enough to band. Okay? When they're too small, you can't band them. When they're 30 days old, then when you approach them, they start to try to get away from you. When the males are 40 days old, they can fly for the first time. When the females are 45 days old, they can fly for the first time. So if you try to approach them between 30 days, when they try to get away from you, and 40 or 45 days when they can first fly, and they're on a building ledge or a bridge or something like that, you can guess what happens. They try to get away from you, they end up in the river or in the street. So we have to get the age just right. And if we approach a nest and we see them and we say, oh, they're too big, we back off because we don't want to cause them any harm.
Excellent. And then we talked about DDT as the cause of the extinction. What are the threats today to the falcon population?
Oh, there are a lot of threats. Just segueing from DDT, there are a lot of chemicals that we use for various reasons which are not good for birds. You hear about mercury from power plant smokestacks or lead. There's a class of chemicals, PBDEs, polybrominated diphenyl ethers. We are all wearing clothes right now that contain PBDEs. They are flame retardants. Are those seats, are they upholstered? There's probably PBDEs in the upholstery as flame retardants, and they can cause DDT-like effects in the birds. So when we find unhatched eggs, and it's not uncommon for 1 or 2 of the eggs not to hatch, when we go to the nest, if there's an unhatched egg that should have hatched 20 or 30 days ago, we take the egg, I send it to collaborators in Illinois, and they do chemical analysis to look for DDT, lead, mercury, PBDEs, and a whole host of other things. Other threats are conflicts at the nest site. You know, if a cliff happens to be a favorite picnic area, that's not good. These birds are protected by law, but still occasionally we find a case where somebody shoots at one of these birds, either by mistake or on purpose, so that's a threat. And I told you about the fledging threats at the man-made structures. So there are a lot of threats out there.
And then finally, you talked about our male here being an elderly resident.
Yes.
Do we know what the oldest falcon in the Commonwealth is right now?
He is 15. Let me think. The female at the Girard Point Bridge this year is 15. Those are the 2 oldest. Those are the 2 oldest. She laid 4 eggs, which surprised me, because when the females get older, then they generally lay fewer and fewer eggs, and also the eggs are less and less fertile. She laid 4 eggs, only 1 of them hatched. And at that, that's pretty good for a 15-year-old.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back over to Bert.
And thank you.
Questions? So we did have a couple other questions that we solicited, and we wanted to ask you a few more if we could. So what other birds of prey species do the Game Commission ban?
Right now, it's just peregrine falcons. Secretary McDonald mentioned that bald eagle numbers and osprey numbers were also decimated by DDT. So they were severely reduced, but they weren't wiped out. There were a few remaining. So between the few that remained, and also by bringing in eggs from sites that weren't affected by DDT, osprey eggs were brought in from Chesapeake Bay, and bald eagle eggs from Canada. That led to a resurgence of the population. The bald eagle and osprey population, during the early days of the recovery, they were banded, but now both of those have recovered fully. There were more than 200 nesting pairs of bald eagles in the state last year, which is excellent. When I started birding, there were either 2 or 3, I don't remember. So those aren't being banded anymore because we don't need to.
So there are a couple other questions for you, Dr. McMorris. One is that do falcons eat prey other than birds?
They do, but rarely. It's quite rare.
Specifically, they were asking about bats.
Yes, they will take bats, these flying things. They will take bats. On rare occasions, we will find remains of, I can't even think of one, but on very rare occasions, they will take other mammals. There are 3 cases that I know of in the world of a peregrine falcon catching a fish. That's very rare. They pick the fish out of the water. Huh. It's rare because fish are different from birds, and it's rare because you have to come down to ground level to get a fish, or to water level. The birds, they pick right out of the air. And the best way for, if a young bird, not a young bird, if any bird is being hunted, is being attacked by a peregrine falcon, the safest thing for it to do is to go to the ground, because they don't like to come to the ground.
Interesting. Do peregrine falcons migrate?
They do, but whether they migrate and how far they migrate depends on where they nest. The birds that nest in Alaska, for example, in the winter, all the birds that they eat are gone. They migrate south. And so the Alaskan peregrines have 2 choices. They can migrate or they can starve to death. And should I say that the smart ones migrate, or should I say that all the ones that were dumb enough not to migrate are dead? But they will migrate. They'll go down to Central and South America for our winter, and then they'll come back. But here in Pennsylvania, throughout the eastern United States, it doesn't get cold in the winter. Now, you might think it gets cold, but you don't have feathers, and you don't have a high rate of metabolism. And most importantly, they have to find enough food. If they can find enough food to eat through the winter, they're fine. And there's plenty of pigeons and starlings right here at Rachel Carson all through the winter. Our birds actually do. The particular parents that nest here will leave for a few weeks in the winter. At other nest sites in Pennsylvania, they don't leave in the winter. So long as there's plenty of food, there's no reason to leave. And if they do leave, then there is the possibility that some other peregrine falcon will try to take over their turf, as happened here during the last winter. A different male showed up, a different female showed up. When the resident mom and dad came, then the interlopers got out of town. But that's a threat that they would face, and they would have to fight to regain control of their territory.
So lastly, I thought this was an interesting question that we received, is what do you personally think of banning falcons that nest on a building named for Rachel Carson?
I am thrilled. I am absolutely thrilled that they came, and no one tried to lure them here. They just came on their own. That the building that is named after the woman who wrote Silent Spring and alerted the population and basically told the scientists who sort of knew about it but weren't doing enough at the time that, hey, this is a serious thing, I got to do something about it. That the woman who publicized the problems of DDT, the building named after her, had a pair of peregrine falcons show up and say, hey, somebody built a nice cliff for us with a beautiful cliff ledge, let's nest here. That's just a thrill.
Okay, any other questions from the audience here? Well, first, let's give the Game Commission and Dr. McMorris a round of applause.
Thank you.
We appreciate the opportunity to work with the Game Commission and with you and keeping an eye on what we consider a very special pair of peregrine falcons here at the Rachel Carson building. So, I also want to recognize and thank the students from St. Stephen's Episcopal Church, or Episcopal School, to be here. I appreciate that. Put your hands up real quick. Thank you. And then we have the Environmental Studies students from Pine Grove High School. I think they're on both sides of us here. And I really want to thank our volunteers that we have upcoming is the Falcon Watch and Rescue period of time. And they are kind enough to really step up their efforts that allow me to go home once in a while, which my wife and family appreciate. But so we have achieved what we wanted to accomplish today, and that is banding these young falcons, these eyases. And so from now till ideally the end of their life, if biologists or people in the public encounter them and are able to tune in today and know what the bands are telling them, you'll be able to identify that bird for the rest of its life. And that's really neat stuff because we can tell things like, where they go to, how long do they live, where do they end up if they were born here at Rachel Carson building. We've had other birds show up and start nesting in other parts of the state. So it's always really interesting to see what the returns may yield. So thank everybody on behalf of the Department of Environmental Protection for showing up here today, and for those of us that are joining us online and electronically and on Facebook. I hope we enjoyed today's program, and keep looking at the Pennsylvania Falcon Cam and keep sending in those responses to which different species they happen to be feeding on. I thought last week the Baltimore Orioles was sort of something a little different, so you never know. So once again, thanks for coming out today, and I hope that everybody continues to tune in and stay up to date on what's going on with peregrine falcons that nest in the Rachel Carson building. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert.